and a very sort of distinctive way of walking.
In the year 595, Muhammad was hired by a wealthy woman of Mecca named Khadijah to organize and guide a caravan for her. He accepted and returned with a handsome profit. The trip would begin a new life for Muhammad and Khadijah.
He was an international business executive whose boss was a woman, and he was obviously very eligible, and she proposed to him directly.
Khadija, in many ways, is an interesting historical figure. She's a self-made woman who decided to propose to Muhammad, who was not a prophet at that time. He was, reports say, 15 years her junior. They apparently had a very loving relationship.
Muhammad and Khadijah had 5 daughters. Muhammad was an adoring father, and throughout his life displayed affection for all children. Although the clan headed by his uncle had little prestige among the Quraysh, Muhammad's reputation in Mecca continued to grow. He was known for his kindness to slaves, his charity to the poor, and his fairness in dealing with all. Each year during Ramadan, the 9th month of the lunar year, Muhammad sought out the mountains surrounding Mecca as a place where he could refresh himself in solitude and prayer. In the year 610, at the age of 40, the humble business manager and family man took himself on one of these retreats to a mountain cave. Day and night, Muhammad remained in the cave to fast and pray. One night, as flames danced on the darkened cave walls, Muhammad's life changed forever. Suddenly, an angel in the form of a man appeared and commanded him, "Proclaim." Muhammad was terrified and confused and said he had nothing to proclaim. The angel clasped Muhammad in a suffocating embrace. Harder and harder he was squeezed until it seemed the last breath of life would be wrung from his body.
Proclaim in the name of thy Lord who created man from a clot of blood. Proclaim, and thy Lord is most bountiful.
Muhammad was terrified and ran from the cave. He was sure something awful was happening to him, but as he scrambled over the mountainside, the angel returned and spoke again.
O Muhammad, thou art the messenger of God, and I am Gabriel.
He was terrified. I think any of us would be if we suddenly started receiving voices and seeing visions of angels. The traditions about the life of the Prophet present him as coming back from this experience profoundly shaken.
Petrified with fear from a mystical experience he did not comprehend, Muhammad rushed to Khadijah.
And she held him in her arms and said, "You know, my dear, you know, these things are from God." And it was she who convinced him that these were not delusions.
But in his fear, Muhammad did not fully understand the frightening events that had happened to him. He could not know that the angel Gabriel would return again and again to deliver the words of God, and that the words that would eventually pour from Muhammad's lips would forever alter the future of his people and the world. In the year 610, a 40-year-old Arab businessman with a wife and a family had been suddenly visited by an angel and commanded to become God's messenger. Slowly, Muhammad ibn Abdullah began to accept that God wished him to speak to his people, as Moses and Christ had carried God's word in another time. Several revelations followed the first, but Muhammad was confused and struggled to understand precisely what message God wanted him to carry. Then, suddenly, the revelations stopped.
Muhammad waited in darkness. He thought perhaps God had abandoned him. Perhaps he hadn't been worthy.
He did not know whether that was the end of the communication with God, and what was he supposed to do based on that limited communication.
What had he done to offend heaven and the angel who had spoken to him? How could he be a messenger if he had no message? But as he sunk to the depths of despair, the silence was broken by another revelation.
By the morning brightness and by the stillness of the night, thy Lord hath not forsaken thee, nor is he displeased with thee. What is to follow is better than what has preceded, and soon thou wilt be granted that which will please thee.
It was now clear to Muhammad that he had not misunderstood the first revelations. He had indeed been called to tell the world there must be no other gods but the one God, Allah. As more revelations came, the words were etched into Muhammad's memory. As he recited them, they were written down and became the Qur'an, God's holy book. At first, only Khadija and a few close friends and family accepted the Qur'an. But little by little, Muhammad started to speak out, and Arabs and other clans of the Quraysh began to embrace the message. The words of the Qur'an clearly had great impact, for his listeners responded to the words not as religious instructions, but as poetry.
Before the rise of Islam, the Arabs did not have great architecture, did not have great art of textile, or practically no calligraphy, but that very great poetry, oral poetry. That was the supreme art.
And so what had developed at that time was a culture in which poetry played the role perhaps of television programs, maybe soap operas, even more in our modern culture.